The title of the talk today is Fast Identification of Interesting Spatial Regions with Applications in Human Development Research, and this is authored by a team comprising both computer scientists and social scientists. To set the context of the work, let us look at some of the aspects in human development research which might be of interest. So first, the existence and non-existence of spatially localized correlations between attributes in population data is of high interest in human development research. So let's look at an example. A localized correlation, which could be a city-wide or a small or a province-wide correlation between education and early marriage, marriage at a very early age may indicate the need for a deeper understanding and or policy intervention. This is because education is generally correlated with late marriages, and so an early marriage and education correlation is surprising enough to be looked into in a deeper manner, and that might be the fallout of some policy deficiency. So typically, if you need to address such a question within the social sciences, you would do the following thing. You would identify indicative trends of a correlation, such as these two attributes, for example, by means of a gut feel. This is by just evaluating whether there is likely to be a correlation based on your own expertise, and then do the data collection using carefully authored questionnaires in order to understand whether this correlation actually exists. And this is called primary data collection, and that is called primary data collection because it is data collected for the purpose of answering that particular question. And then you analyze the collected data and confirm or discard the initial trend. And if you confirm the trend, you might be able to write a paper about it. Right? Okay. And so these days, there is availability of large data sets covering a number of trends, covering a number of attributes that could cover a number of trends. And these are often called secondary data because they're collected not to address a particular research question, but to understand trends on a variety of things. Okay. So we can replace this gut feel based process of identifying indicative trends that we saw in the first step of the HDR process by data driven discovery, and that is what we try to achieve by way of this paper. Okay, so let's move on and identify or describe the concrete problem, which we call as the interesting region discovery problem. We would like to find a region and sets of pairs of attributes where R is a coherent spatial region, okay, and for every pair of attributes within that set, the relative trends between AI and BI is different in that region from the global trends. So this is what we want to have, okay. This is what we want to have in the output, and the input is basically a data set of of population data along with spatial locations as to where the people are from, right? Okay, so let's move on. An example of this output could be a localized region where water access is correlated with disease incidence. Generally, water access is decorrelated with disease incidence because the better water access you have, the lesser number of diseases is typically observed. So this correlation, which is untrue in the general sense or in the expected sense, may indicate polluted water or some drainage contamination that happens a lot of times within developing regions like the India context that we use in this paper. So so in this case, the spatial region followed by the attributes water access and diseases would be something that you might expect in the output. So henceforth, for ease of describing, we will use symbols to denote our attribute pair. So water access, diseases is an attribute pair that might be indicated by a symbol, let's say X. Okay. So let's quickly go on to the scoring. There might be a large number of such interesting regions in every data set. We would like to identify a few high scoring ones. So we need to define a score so that we can discriminate between these regions. So the scoring, we believe, should be proportional to the number of attribute pairs deviating from the global trends within the same region. So if a number of attribute pairs deviate together collectively within that region, then the region is of higher interest. And the larger the size of the region, the more interesting it is because it has implications or ramifications for a larger number of people living in that region, larger population potentially. And if there is spatial coherence, which is basically by saying that a region that is spatially coherent, which is basically a city rather than an elongated portion, which where the person at one end may not even know the person at the other end, or well, not about knowing, but essentially you want to have some kind of a spatial coherence, so that it could have the same cause, so that it's more interesting to look at from a human development perspective. Okay, now so let's look at an illustration here, and this is just to set out the format, set out the notation here. So let us say that there is a spatial region gridded into 16 cells, and we have some annotated symbols, and we'll just explain what these symbols are. Each symbol in a cell indicates that the corresponding attribute pair exhibits deviating behavior in the cell as well as a global trend against the global trends. So A is a symbol which stands for maybe an attribute pair, maybe education, child marriage, and the presence of A in a grid cell says that that grid cell has a deviant behavior for that symbol as against a global behavior in the data set. So if you have a grid cell without anything in it, it says that all the attribute pairs exhibit relative behavior that is consistent with the global trends. So we use a crisp classification of 0 or 1 on whether attribute pairs deviate from global trends. This is not really necessary, but we use it for convenience sake, and we identify this crisp classification based on a statistical significance test. So p-value less than 0.05 indicates that it is a statistically significant deviation. Otherwise, it says it is conformant to the global trend. So moving on, let's look at some examples here. So in this same data set that we showed in the previous slide, let's look at a number of regions that might be interesting. So the first region is big enough, but the number of common symbols across the grid cells is very small. For example, if there is only one symbol, which is A, which is common across all the 9 grid cells. Okay, it is a large region. It is spatially coherent. So it is good on 2 factors, but not good on the number of common symbols. So let's look at the second region. The second region has many common symbols, A, B, C, D. All of them are common, but it's a very small region, but it is spatially coherent as well. And the third one, it has a lot of common symbols because A, X, Y, Z are present in all the 4 cells. So it is a large region because it has 4 cells, not 2, unlike the previous case. But it is not very spatially coherent. That is because it seems like it comprises 2 regions that are connected to by a very small strand, which is not really very desirable. So let's look at the fourth region. The fourth region has three common symbols across all the grid cells, and it's a reasonably large region. It has four grid cells, and it is spatially coherent as well. So we would like to have a scoring function that prioritizes regions like the fourth region. Okay, so the contribution in this paper is that we formulate the interesting region discovery problem. We outline an interestingness scoring function. We provide an efficient algorithm which draws upon indexing and such methods to identify the top k interesting regions. And you can address any questions or comments to the second author in the paper, and he can be reached at deepak@acm.org. Thank you very much.